Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. A lot of the guns in Warzone right now are relatively easy to use, especially the MW3 ones that are pretty low in terms of visual recoil, weapon sway, kick, and whatnot there. But there are a few specific standouts when it comes to just the absolute easiest weapons to use. And so with that today, I wanted to break down the top 5 lowest recoil options for weapons and loadouts that we have right now. Now, I did just say a lot of the MW3 ones are really the primary factors here, but the STB556 as an MW2 gun is surprisingly easy across the board. Low visual recoil. The pattern is very basic, more of like an S curve up and to the right. I will include clips of me shooting the gun, showing off the pattern and whatnot in the firing range with all these different builds, but the STB is incredibly easy. It also happens to be an extremely competitive rifle in terms of like overall TTK as well. It can actually compete very well within the category. So sort of a win-win here for a weapon that doesn't get too much attention considering it's an older MW2 gun at this point. As far as the setup here goes, it's a pretty standard mid to long range build here. We got the Eagle Eye 2.5 times. As always, I go for this for my mid to long range, but if there's a different scope you like more, always go for preference there. One of the drawbacks of the STB is the 42 round mag. This is not a ton of ammo for this pretty fast fire rate, so you end up running out of ammo a lot and having to reload. It still, gets the job done though with what you have. You just got to be mindful of that reloading when that's going to happen. You don't want to do that in the middle of a team pushing you or anything. I also go for the rear guard barrel. This increases the range and the velocity, just makes it a little bit easier to use. One thing to note here though is that it does end up reducing that aiming idle sway, which is a bit of a con. So that said, if you're really into that and you don't want to ever like focus on negating that some, you could always swap this out. My second choice would probably be the Brewing Gorilla. This is just velocity and control, so it makes the gun even easier and it's not hurting that sway whatsoever. So that'd be my alternative then in that specific kind of build. But because this is so easy, you might be able to get away with rear guard just fine there. I'm also using Bruin heavy support, so this will gain that idle sway back, also adds in some firing aiming stability, and of course directly attacks that horizontal control. And lastly, we got the Spirit Fire Suppressor, better range, better velocity, better control across the board, obviously really making it efficient for the mid to long range. Definitely a slept on option here, but it's honestly really good and of course super easy. Next up, we've actually got the FR556 or the FAMAS. This is a burst weapon, and really the reason it's on here is because the recentering ability here basically means you can spam this back to back to back with bursts, and it's rarely going to deviate from where your true aim is, where the center of your scope is. So it's really easy to stay on target with this over even pretty extreme distances, while also being a decent TTK option in the rifle category as well. So initially here we are going for that Spirit Fire Suppressor. Again, better range, better velocity, better control on that. Bruin heavy support is extra important here because this is a burst weapon, so aiming idle sway and firing aiming stability is so important here, just to keep those bursts consistent. Basically, it's also nice when it does help out that general gun kick and makes it a little bit easier to use across the board. I've got the 60 round extended mag on there, pretty basic, 2.5 times Eagle Eye yet again. And then just behind the face cam, I go for the FR ton rear comb or comb attachment, which helps out with that aiming idle sway and a little bit of control as well. So again, this just makes the weapon way easier to use. And if you're looking for a screenshot, feel free to take that with no face cam in the way. But that comb does actually replace a barrel, the longbow. I was previously running this, but the more I looked at it, hey, that's really hurting that aiming idle sway. Not a huge fan of that for mid to long range on a burst style weapon in specific. So we have changed that up a little bit. But yeah, this thing is also really easy, especially for a burst. Really is very forgiving. Next up here, we've actually got the Sakin MG38, another MW2 gun. I really tried to, figure out which MW2 guns were going to thrive the most in this style of video and see what ones really actually could compete. Like for instance, the Sakin MG38, incredibly low recoil. It's more of like an S curve up and to the left here. And with that, its damage really is not all that great. Like in terms of TTK in the LMG category, it's not going to be record shattering by any means, but what you have here is a super low recoil weapon, so that it's realistic TTK. When you factor in accuracy, maybe with some other LMG choices you miss more shots, it becomes a lot more competitive because of that fact. So with that true TTK accuracy sort of factored in, it's honestly a decent weapon to use. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be my number one pick in the LMG category because there are some other easy ones, but this is one that really does stand out as something that really anyone can pick up and do well with. Here I have had to go through and make a different setup because again, we're focusing so much on the aiming idle sway now, and on MW2 guns you really don't want to hurt that. Initially, Spirit Fire Suppressor, basic range, control, and velocity. I also got the Bruin heavy support, of course, for that better horizontal control, making that pattern a lot more predictable, and of course the better sway and firing aim stability there. I do just go for like a basic extended mag here. here with the 125 round belt, just because for rear grips you can get some better control, but it's going to hurt your aiming idle sway. For barrels, if you're going for long range, it's going to hurt your aiming idle sway regardless. You don't need a laser on an LMG build, so maybe you could go for something like you know, high grain if you wanted to. It might hurt your control a little bit, but if it's easy enough to use, that would be a viable choice. But other than that, you don't really have much to go for, because we're of course using the 2.5 times Eagle Eye. Then I go for the Sakin Riptide stock. On the advanced stats, it's not going to show us doing anything positively, but it is giving you better aiming idle sway, so again, just makes that pattern more predictable here. Definitely, again, a weapon that I don't think gets all that much attention, because you look at the TTK and go, okay, that's kind of mediocre, but realistically, it can hold its own okay. By the way, as we are going through all the setups here today, if you are new to the channel, every single day I got you covered with news, updates, patch notes, meta breakdowns. Really everything going on in COD is right here, so feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. And if you enjoy the video, or if you find it helpful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. It's always really appreciated. Next up here, we've got the SVA 545, but in Hyperburst or semi-auto mode. This is a super unique weapon, sort of like the AN94, where it shoots its first 2 bullets incredibly quickly, and if you flip it to semi-auto mode, it ends up shooting both of those 2 shots simultaneously, essentially. So it's a little bop bop like burst, 2-round burst essentially, and the recoil just doesn't really exist. You can spam this at the max fire rate for semi-auto and it's not gonna move. It's actually insanely busted. It's so efficient in game too. So initially here, Spirit Fire Suppressor, same old there. Precision Barrel, this is gonna help out with aiming idle sway, better control, range, and velocity, so that's all W's there. 60 round extended mag, 2.5 times Eagle Eye Optic, and then just because there is like no recoil, no sway, no bounce here, I just go for the main V6 stock. This helps out with that general gun kick, so it makes that visual recoil a lot more minimal. The basic pattern as well. You don't really need to have an underbarrel or anything here, just because the weapon's already so easy as is. You could also even make it more aggressive if you wanted to by going for a faster stock or a rear grip or a laser that might speed you up some if you wanted to play more like mid-range with this too. Totally viable there. But yeah, this weapon in terms of like easiest to use, well, it does have like the semi-auto skill gap. Its recoil is like, just like I said, non-existent. And then lastly here we've got the MX9. This thing is also surprisingly easy for an MW2 gun, and actually kind of a sleeper option in the SMG category. Its TTK is pretty close with a lot of the top tier MW3 subs as well. I will say again, it is super limited by its magazine capacity, similar to the STB. Also, its ADS speed isn't like phenomenally fast by comparison, so you have to do a little bit to work on that. But in terms of ease of use, it's not too shabby. Again, it's like another S curve sort of up and to the right there, so not too difficult whatsoever. Initially here I've got the Bruin S901 barrel. This does make it a bit more versatile by extending that range and that velocity some, so keeps it you know, in terms of TTK, competitive through the mid-range, which is pretty important here. Speeds it up a tad bit as well in terms of general mobility. I do have the Kimura laser. It's bright, it's visible, but it's going to do the most to your sprint to fire and your ADS speed. That said, using something like 7 milliwatt would be a viable choice as well if you want something that's not nearly as bright and shiny. I also go for the slate reflector, a basic red dot here. I don't like the irons. They're kind of clunky, they're kind of bulky, they get in the way, so I do waste an attachment on that, unfortunately. If you're okay with the irons, you could go for a mobility stock or a control based compensator, whatever you feel like the weapon really needs more. As mentioned, ammo capacity is a big deal here. Only 32 rounds is your max mag. That's not a ton. Kind of tough to get around that though, so it's definitely like a solos based weapon primarily. Then lastly, just behind the face cam, I go for the TT-F3 riser. It helps out that ammo reserve and then just your ADS speed a little bit. 1%, it's increasing it a tad bit. While you do have some other decent options for combs, one's gonna hurt your idle sway, then one's gonna slow you down a little bit in terms of strafe and ADS. So like, really the ammo here is what we're getting out of that, just because it is limited, so it's nice to at least get some extra there. You could also find that in game. It's kind of an awkward gun where some attachments just aren't really doing super convenient things across the board, despite it being relatively easy, and like I said, kind of slept on in the grand scheme of things. And of course, if you wanted that full screenshot, feel free to go ahead and grab that. But overall, some weapons that you might not really utilize in standard gameplay all that much, just because you didn't realize they're actually incredibly easy to use across the board. So you may want to test them out and see how you like them. That said, that's going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button on your way out. That way you can always guarantee you're up to date with absolutely everything going on in COD. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.